Hey y'all, it's Steve, Hobo with Wood. This video, I'm going to address a topic that I've talked about quite a bit, but I'm going back to the very basics. What is Kerf? And how to use it in Lightburn. So hang around. So in a lot of my videos, you've heard me talk about kerf, adding the kerf. You know, how do you account for the kerf in your designs? Finding the perfect kerf for your diode laser. But there are a lot of my viewers been reaching out to me who have demonstrated they don't fully understand what kerf is. And so I thought I'd go right back to the very basics, explaining kerf, and then showing you. I talk a lot about kerf and adding it to you, but I don't have many videos that show you where you add the kerf in Lightburn. So we're going to show you that here too. So essentially, kerf is the width of your cut. The cut that is made using, in this case, our lasers. But kerf, initially, you're talking mechanical cuts. Anything with a skill saw, a jigsaw, a sawzall, or a table saw. Anything that creates a cut. The width of that cut, the material that is cut away and wasted, turned into sawdust. That gap as you're cutting the material. The width of that gap is your kerf. And your kerf is going to vary from machine to machine, and even, believe it or not, with the lasers especially, your kerf can vary from material to material. You can have what you know is your base kerf for your most commonly used wood. In my case, it's my premium Baltic birch, little 300 by 300 Baltic birch plywood. I know what my kerf is with that material. But when I start using different hardwoods, and every species of hardwood cuts differently, it burns differently, and essentially that's what you're doing with a laser. You're not cutting it, you're burning it. You're burning that material away with the laser beam. And with each species having a different reaction and a different type of reaction to the laser, it's the way it burns, your kerf will vary. So if you're using the same material all the time, you can test and find that kerf for that laser on that material, and you pretty much don't have to worry about it. But if you're going to be experimenting with different types of material, you're going to need to experiment with your kerf for each of those materials. You'll find that it is pretty common with, and your base kerf will be the same on a lot of materials, but not all the time. So if you're going to be cutting with some really expensive hardwoods and you're needing that kerf to be exactly right so you get a really good tight fit, then you need to do some tests before you start cutting and assuming your kerf will be the same. So I've got a few pictures here, and I'm going to try and post them right up here. And one's going to show you, for those who have been around woodworking, and whether or not you've actually done the cutting or done, what's really tricky if you don't fully understand, and you've got two people who are, one's measuring and one's cutting. Well, the cutter might ask the person measuring, he's been handed a piece of material to cut down. He's like, okay, do I need to cut the line, leave the line, or outside the line? That may be completely Greek to a lot of you. Do I cut the line, leave the line, or outside the line? Well, that's what these photos are going to demonstrate. You're going to cut the line, And to cut the line, you are putting that saw blade right on the line that's been marked, and that's what you cut. And in these photographs, the fence is to the right. So if you cut the line, then you're going to be cutting from the fence to that line of the 5 inches. But you see, the saw blade is 1/8 of an inch thick. So then if you needed a 5-inch piece, and that was cut and marked to 5 inches, well, if you cut the line, you're not going to have a 5-inch piece. So you would have to cut outside the line. So it actually, you may be in a situation where you've got somebody up on a ladder who's measuring something, yelling down to somebody else, and he says, I need a 5-inch piece. And then that person, if it's not the same person that's cutting, then they'll measure, mark, and then they pass it over to the cutter, and the cutter's like, you need a 5-inch piece. What does this cut to? He's not measuring anything. He's just got a piece of material and lines. So what I need, he just said, do I cut the line, leave the line out, in or out of the line? And it doesn't matter to him. They say, cut the line. He cuts the line, done. Now it's less than 5 inches. Leave the line, and he knows to set his saw up with the fence so that it will, when he cuts that piece, that line is left, and when you check it and measure it, it's 5 inches. And depending on how that team of people work together, you know, it's like this person who's measuring and the cutter, they just know that whoever's measuring and marking, he will mark to the exact point, and that's what I need. And whoever's cutting the material knows his saw and knows the kerf of his saw, and he knows that if this is what he needs to adjust his saw accordingly, and he will cut, and so that the end result is what he measured and left. So that's kerf. So you need to know, do you cut the line, cut inside the line, or cut outside the line? But with a laser, all you're able to do is send that line in the form of girdle to the laser, and it's going to cut the line. It's going to cut the line, period. That's all it can do. Unless you adjust the kerf in Lightburn. And you can add kerf and or take away kerf. A positive kerf is going to add, it's going to go outside the line. A negative kerf will come inside the line. And there are times that we're going to need both. So now that you understand, I hope, what kerf is, let's jump in here to Lightburn and see how and where do you add your kerf. Now this video has nothing to do with determining your kerf. I've got plenty of videos on that and explaining why your kerf is going to vary from one machine to the next and from one power output to the next, and it even on your diode lasers, and I'm struggling because your diode lasers do not have a round spot size. It's more ovaloid or closer to, it's more oval shaped than it is round. So on your y-axis, you're going to have one kerf, and on your x-axis, you're going to have a different kerf because it is a different shape. So that's why I have videos showing how to find your perfect kerf when you're cutting. If you're only cutting straight lines, if you're making boxes, then if you rotate your design on your workbed and cut everything, instead of cutting it out on X and Y, you cut everything out on a 45-degree angle, then you'll have the exact same kerf on every single line and every single cut. Because that ovaloid shape now is moving at a 45-degree angle in both directions, and it creates a perfect spot size, but only when you're cutting straight lines. If you're cutting out a flower or any kind of graphic that's going to have it moving on angles and lines and then your kerf is going to fluctuate constantly. It's never going to be exactly uniform. But let's see where you add the kerf in Lightburn. So if you've got a square and you're going to cut that out, and you need it to be, we'll say you need it to be 100 millimeter square. And you send that to the laser with your speed and power settings, and it cuts that out. When you go and measure this, it's not going to be 100 millimeters because that laser is cutting straight down that line, and it's going to create a kerf. It's going to cut away material, and that material is going to go away from the outside and the inside of that line, because that's just how kerf works. That saw blade, that laser beam, is going to write down that line, and the thickness or the width of your laser on that Y or on that X is going to create, a gap on either side of that line. So when you go and measure this, it's not going to be 100 millimeters square. It's going to be 100 millimeters less your total kerf, because you're going to get half of it. That's going to go right down the middle. So you're going to burn away excessive material on the outside and on the inside of that square. So if you measured this, since it burned away some on the inside here, some on the inside here, that total width, you would be able to take that and subtract it from the 100 millimeters and get that total kerf on this piece of material right here. Well, how do you get that added back in so you can get a 100 millimeter kerf? Well, you go back to your cuts and layers, and then when you're in line mode, you set up your speed and power settings, number of passes, and right here is your kerf offset. And it's in millimeters right here because I'm in millimeters up here. If I was in inches and go back and look, it's going to give my kerf offset in inches. Now I work in millimeters most of the time, and I didn't get it switched. Cancel. I work in millimeters most of the time. There we go. And now I know what my kerf is for this laser, and so it's a 0.12 millimeters. So I put in 0.12, and you see here it's telling you outward kerf. So that's going to move my laser 0.12 millimeters outside the line, and that's going to be my true kerf is a 0.24, but I'm going to move it out half because I needed to move it out only half this way and then half that way. Then that will give me, when I cut it out and measure it, it'll give me a perfect 100 millimeter square. So this was supposed to be just a short, what is kerf and where do you put it in? I'll put links down in the description below to several other videos that I've got that go into more detail about how to find your kerf, and it's dealing in one of them, how to find your perfect kerf on a diode laser. That one's really good, especially if you're making boxes. So thank you for hanging out with me. Guys, I got to get back. I'm renovating the house. I'm getting back to work swinging hammers, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. I'm Steve, Hobo with Wood, and I'm out.